try to go somewhere cool, as in a cool place, but there's a provincial campground on a river nearby, and the river is just ripping, way too much noise. And then of course the ocean started falling out of the sky again. So I abandoned ship and came back to the man cave. Been messing with some microphones. The one you see right here is actually, it only hooks up with computers, not the DSLR, which I'm using right here. And yes, I do have a cordless microphone, but I have a lot of grief for that thing for some unknown reason. I don't have any batteries right now to mess with it. What else? I have one of those Rode, microphones that sits on top of that camera somewhere. But I don't have a battery for that either. And I'm not going to the store, damn it. So, but I do have a little Chewy Chewbacca right here. And this is the one that I have used a lot in the past with you guys when I've been up in the mountains, and I will set up this camera like, 40 yards away from me. Like, remember that spot where the huge crazy mountains are behind me and I'm way up on the mountains where I thought I filmed that thing watching the timber, that spot? And that's the only way I can get away with the audio, is using this thing. And then you mesh it up with that camera on the editing program later. So I'm going to try that right now and see if this little bastard will do better. And there we go. That is recording audio right now. We'll put that behind that ironwood moose that I bought on the beach in Mexico years ago. Just saw that sucker on the floor a minute ago and threw him up on the desk here, the pretend desk. But anyway, I want to get right into it. I'm trying to cut back on my babbling. I can tell you this. It can be quite frustrating when you think for yourself. I swear to God, life would be so much more easier possibly if you would just accept being told. told what to think, told what to do, told how to act, told where to go, told what to jam in your body, told how much money you have to give some dishonest pricks and be happy about it. To be in that position must be a little more comforting than it is to think of yourself, possibly. Because the more I learn, the more I watch, the more I observe, it can get really challenging at times, because it can be so frustrating, especially the level of deceit that's going on, that you see it so clearly daily. And it can be very frustrating. And I'm not sure what's more frustrating at this point of the game. It's the frustration of seeing so many people not giving a shit. And that's very frustrating. It's also very frustrating to not be able to just jump in your truck, go to the source of the problem and fix it. Do you know what I mean? And fix it for the good of humanity, without being labeled a crazy maniac and thrown in behind bars because you tried to put an end to the bad guys for your society, for your world, for your people. It's frustrating times. Anyway, maybe it's too much rain, too much clouds. Maybe if I could find a big bucket of liquid vitamin D and chuck it in the tub and lay in it for a bit. Maybe that would tone me down a bit, but I watch all the time. I listen to a good handful of who I consider straight up intelligent individuals, and I listen to them, and they're spread around the country, spread around the world actually. And I listen to them, and yeah. Maybe I'll make up a list of who I believe is worthy of your time if you are curious of listening to truth. Maybe I'll do that shortly. Suggestion to you anyway, take from what you will and leave it, right? Actually, I wouldn't mind somebody doing that back as well. We should get a public little list going. Maybe I'll do it on the community page. We'll take in a whole pile of names of people who are on the good guy team and need to be heard to help ourselves. All right, here we go. Let's get on it. Babbling like a ding dong. No subject in the title of this email. Dear Steve, as always, thank you. You're changing the way we open up about strange things, things we don't understand and don't like to talk about. And this is my 4th letter. The first one was very confusing. I was mad the post about COVID and Roger's spur was removed. Don't know what you're talking about. It is a disaster. I'm sorry. It was so confusing. You'll undoubtedly remember I shared my mom was half Cree and she grew up around Prince Rupert, Queen Charlotte Islands, then Kodiak. I was born and raised on a homestead between Sterling and Soldotna, Alaska. I've had strange things happen around me since my very first memory. In addition, I sent one on Shortcuts and one titled Fire Squatch. I'll share another today. This one I don't share normally. Only you and your channel have changed my mind about keeping my own counsel. Perhaps it'll help someone else open up. I was just 20 when I started driving the Dalton Highway. It's the haul road for the Alaska Pipeline. Living Good, Alaska. Dead Horse, Purdue Bay. My first trip was not planned. After working as a hostler all day, my boss volunteered me to drive a Halliburton truck to the North Slope. I left Fairbanks about 8 p.m. I didn't have a CB radio in that truck, and I was never really sure where I was. Late in January '82, it was dark the entire trip. 6 hours of the gray, dim daylight didn't help much. So there I was, dropping down to the Yukon River. Just above Pump Station 6, I noticed something walking up the road southbound. I was northbound. As I approached the creature, I couldn't understand what it was. It's about midnight, very cold. I gelled my fuel line the next day, cold, -40 or so. This thing was white, snow-covered, I assumed. He was walking on 2 feet upright on the road. As I got close, it stepped off the road, sunk up to its hips in the snow. As it made for the trees, it went down on all 4s. Then it dove under the snow like a beaver, and it was gone. I drove past. Figured I was just tired. That was a long time ago, but I'm positive it was real. It reminded me of a mountain goat when it went down on all 4s. I thought it was a moose or a caribou, but that area, that time of year, makes it unlikely. It was something. Use my name, use the initial. I'm John C. Richard. Dad was John Alvin, my son is John Bruin. Please don't forget the C. Sincerely yours, John Charles Richart. Pronounced Richart. Rich Hart. John Charles Rich Hart, thank you very much, my man. The name lost an H on Ellis Island. Ellis, whatever. Okay, gotcha. And yeah, no doubt, wouldn't be surprised if 1 second they dove into the snow like any one of us would if you're hiding on our friends, playing hide and seek, living where there's powder snow or deep snow, right? These beings know how to elude humans, and humans aren't that hard to hide from. I'll never forget one person mentioning one time about how they drove up the driveway in the dark and they noticed a great big huge pile of leaves as they drove by. And I remember, wait a minute, there wasn't a pile of leaves back there, and they turned around and this thing got up and walked away. It just sat down and froze and didn't move, which usually throws off any human if you're wearing the right colors, right? But anyway, did I read your other emails? I don't know. I'll have to look and find out, I guess. Thanks for sending that in, man. Now, what else do we have here besides thousands of people waiting impatiently for me to do what they want me to do? Right? 3 stories and some drawings. That's the title of this one. Hi, Steve just called me MASH. I sent you an email with the title 3 Short Stories in February 2019, I believe. Attached to this email, I have drawings that help explain my experience. So if you read this email, search 3 short stories to find my old email and delete it. When you mention dormant human abilities that have been suppressed and dumbed down for generations, I think these screens, cell phones, computers, and television, the media, education system, and the government have something to do with it. 110%. As we've seen for the past 2 years, is that the government wants more control of our lives, and the media and tech giants are helping them. If humans spontaneously started getting superpowers, heightened senses, and other abilities, how the F would they be able to control that? No shit. I believe that is the main fear of whoever is running this shit show. Guaranteed it is, man. Could you imagine if every single human being on the face of the planet lost fear? Not common sense fear, like fear of jumping in the ocean with rocks in your pockets and no life jacket, not, or jumping into a bathtub with 7 rattlesnakes fear, but fear of each other, fear of authority, fear of human beings. Imagine if humans absolutely dropped fear. They'd have some big problems on their hands. I mean, huge problems on their hands. I think I've felt the abilities myself. And I know this will sound crazy and stupid, and a part of me just wants to limit it to coincidence. That happens too often, and the odds are too great to overlook. Here's a summarized list. I often finish people's sentences. I'm not sure if it's because I follow the train of thought as they speak and I beat them to the end, or if I am somehow reading thoughts. I often will be thinking of someone throughout my day, and they will contact me the same day or the day after. Some people I know well, and some I don't. I often bring home food to find out that my mother has brought home the exact same food on the same day for the same meal. I often get gut instincts about people's emotions and situations, and every time I have ignored it, I end up getting screwed. I love animals, and I think that I can read their emotions much easier than most other people. This is going to sound so stupid. This one time, for shits and giggles, I tried to control a ladybug that was crawling across my ceiling. I focused on the ladybug intensely with my mind. In my thoughts, I told it to move to the right. It moved to the right for about a foot. I then told my mind to move to the left. It started moving to my left. I was laughing at myself because I was sure it was coincidence. But then in my mind, I told the ladybug to drop off the ceiling and fly away, and the ladybug instantly dropped off the ceiling, almost hitting me in the face, and flew away. I know most people are going to laugh, but it did happen. What are the odds of it doing as I think 3 times in a row? Pretty epic slim odds. I've had a few encounters with things in the woods that I cannot explain. I was around 16 years old, living in Ontario, an hour outside Ottawa, in farming country. One day I got in my car to go visit my girlfriend at the time. As I drove down the road, I encountered something that my mind instantly identified as a hyena. It was facing away from me. It was large, maybe 2 feet wide. 2 feet wide. A bit taller than the hood of my car, Ford Contour. It was a caramel colored with dark spots. Its ass was lower than its front and just like a hyena. It was on the right side of the road as I drove, and I got about 20 to 30 feet from it. It had a very strange run, like it was a puppy, and his paws were too big for it. I didn't get a good look at his paws. How familiar is this sounding? I only saw it for about 2 or 3 seconds before it entered the thick cedars beside the road. I thought afterwards that it was probably an injured dog, but I heard no reports of the neighbor's dogs being injured or lost. But what bugged me was how big it was. I've never seen a dog that wide before or since. My second weird encounter happened at a ski hill. I was working out near Kamloops, British Columbia. I often go on a hike in the summertime to build little huts and teepees. I love doing all the bushcraft stuff. One day I went for a hike to my favorite teepee. It was located on a bench near a creek that ran in between the main mountain and a little boob locals called Mid-Mountain. On my way there, I encountered some hikers that told me they saw a black bear. I saw black bears all the time, so I didn't think much of it and continued to the teepee. Once I got across the creek to the teepee, I knelt down and started unloading my gear. That's when I heard heavy footsteps. I couldn't tell if they were bipedal. I heard heavy breathing. It reminded me of my girlfriend's dog after he ran around for a while. Steve, what do bears smell like? I've been very close to a bunch, and I haven't smelled what I smelled that day. The scent that I started to smell was musty. The best way I can describe it was like smelling hot dirt with a hint of body odor. Like if you smelled someone's armpit in the middle of a dog kennel. I've never heard that description. That's kind of a funny one, right? That's a good insult to chuck at one of your buddies when you're drinking beer. Sorry. Imagine it'd be like, oh, sorry. Imagine it'd be like, You smell like somebody's armpit in the middle of a dog kennel. Oh man. It's funny, I have a group thread going now and then with a handful of buddies that we just chuck shit at each other nonstop. That's a good one. The tree line was about 40 feet away, and whatever this was sounded and smelled much closer than that. It sounded 15 feet away. I was focusing on the tree line intensely, but I didn't see any kind of movement. I didn't see any branches move. I didn't see any shape or shadows or outlines of anything. Every hair on my body was standing on end, and all my senses were cranked to 11. I slowly packed up my gear, but kept my hatchet in my hand. I took the exact same way out as I took to get in. And I backed up most of the way, not turning my back to the tree line. A part of me rationalizes it was a bear, but I have never felt that way around bears. The part that really weirds me out was how close it sounded, and not being able to see anything. It didn't, and still doesn't make sense in my mind. There are many similarities with the other encounters you've read that make me question if it was a bear or not. My third encounter was a UFO. I know you want to keep this channel on the Saturday subject, so I'll keep this very brief. I was 13 or 14, living in the same house I saw that hyena, though that came after this experience. I looked out the living room window and saw an egg-shaped thing in the sky. The clouds in the sky were moving one way, and this egg-shaped craft was moving the complete opposite direction as the clouds. I left to grab my flip phone, but when I got back, it was gone. I can't rationalize this one way. I can't rationalize this one away. It was no blimp, that's for sure. Steve, these encounters haven't given me PTSD that I know of. They are fairly mild compared to others' experiences, but I do remember them like it was yesterday. I was still going to the forest, but I always have my head on a swivel, and I watch the wind. I do tell them if they leave me alone, I'll leave them alone, just like you do. If anything, these experiences have helped me influence me to question everything that I've been told throughout my life. Bingo. The media and the government's sole purpose is to control. A huge part of that is withholding significant information from the public. Yes, it is. An incompetent society is more easily manipulated. Knowledge is power, and an informed, independent society that takes care of itself has very little need for government. This threatens the power structure of a bloated and corrupt government that needs you dependent upon it for everything, like an overbearing parent who won't let their child explore the world. Think of it this way. If the people of a country were ready and capable of dealing with emergencies of any kind, the people would only really need the government to fix roads and activate defenses in case of threats. I think that's basically what we're supposed to put those little perks together for in the original time, weren't we? You would think a government would want an independent society so that it could focus its attention and resources to more important problems and those of the society who truly need help. But what we see is the exact opposite. The government wants you sick, weak, confused, dependent, obedient, and unquestioning. They want you strong enough to be a cog in the machine, but not strong enough to think for yourself and not need them anymore. Without a doubt. As we've seen here in Canada, politicians give themselves 20% raises in the middle of a pandemic, give big government contracts to owners of companies who just happen to be friends, treat peaceful protesters like terrorists, treat terrorists like civilians. Politicians get a $200 fine for doing something that would put the average citizen in jail. The hypocrisy and examples of corruption go on and on and on. And there just doesn't seem to be a way to fight back without the paid media turning the person into a terrorist /racist /anti-vaxxer /pariah. I highly urge fellow Canadians to seek other sources of information that aren't bought and paid for censored Canadian media that is just a Trudeau mouthpiece, and question everything. Take the bits and pieces that make sense and withhold a conclusion. It's okay to say I don't know, and I don't have enough info to comment on that. Almost all stories have more than two sides to it, and like a good detective, you should hear all of them and take from them what you will. Thank you for helping people's experiences get to the public, and I understand if mine doesn't make it to video. Just means someone else's will, and that's fine with me. You filled in so many puzzle pieces for me along with David Pilatus. You two are the most genuine, trustworthy folks on the YouTube, in my opinion. You keep doing what you're doing, helping the people. Fuck Trudeau and fuck the reset. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. If you can't be safe, then be dangerous. Stay wild and stay free, MASH. Okay, man. Gotcha. I gotcha. Those are some pretty good drawings. Hopefully I remember to add them. But I've explained to you guys how I do this. I know it frustrates a handful of you, but when I share from my phone, it's in the notes. The pictures are all beside the stories. You can see them right here, little thumbnails. And what happens is when I go back in, I take the SD card from that camera and put it in the edit machine in the house. God only knows when I go to edit. And I don't listen to the complete stories because I can see the pattern of your audio on the bottom line. I can see where I pause, and I'll go straight to that pause and skip out on a whole bunch of me talking because I don't need to hear me. But I need to see what happened at the pause. It needs to be cut out, edit in, whatever. And that's why I keep screwing up and missing out on the photographs. Okay, guys? Absolutely apologize. I know I suck, but I'm slowly getting better, I hope. Yeah. Well, I have a feeling I'll probably remember this time. Who knows? Thanks for that email, man. Keep it coming, all right? If you got any words to help the people, any more, anything, you send it to me. Send it to me. All right, let me mark this as red. Excuse me. Something to consider regarding Sasquatch. From the DNA Project, it is apparent that Sasquatch is a human hybrid. Female human mitochondrial DNA and nuclear DNA that has obviously been spliced, not some product of natural evolution. We may never know the nature or the identity of whatever force is interfering with life on Earth. However, it is apparently responsible for much of the paranormal activity, such as UFOs, hauntings, Sasquatch, and cryptids, etc. However, we may speculate as to why we are being treated like lab rats. This unseen force is meddling for its own amusement. Or there is an environmental upheaval coming and Sasquatch is much better prepared to thrive anywhere without the things that humans have devised to make themselves comfortable. Food, clothing, and shelter aren't man's basic needs, whereas Sasquatch are man's basic needs, whereas Sasquatch seems to be able to eat almost anything. Has no need for clothing and only rudimentary shelter. Sasquatch is the biggest, baddest critter afoot. It is intelligent and has senses that range far beyond ours. If TSHTF, don't know what that stands for, Sasquatch may well become our I guess that means if the shit hits the fan, Sasquatch may well become our replacement as the pinnacle organism on this planet. That may not be a bad thing. Thanks for reading this, Dennis Trimble. Okay, Dennis, thanks, man. You never know. You know, one thing for sure is it sure has been easy for humans to hate on humans, hasn't it not? Especially today. It's been very, very easy for all of us to somehow jump on the bandwagon of hating humans. Man, it's so bad. There's a lot of qualities that humans have that are bad, that's for sure, but there sure is a lot of sweet, awesome qualities in humans as well, right? We can't lose that fact. Got to remind ourselves of that, right? There is a lot of good out here. There is a lot of good included in being a human being. It just sucks that the genetic flaw that is in a lot of humans enables a human being to need to crave the power and control of other human beings at all costs. You know, it's very unfortunate. Now, it's this one. This is titled A Lifetime of Experiences, March 2022. Well, recent one. Thanks, Steve, for helping all of us. Love the places you make the videos. I started to put together my experiences a few months ago. I hope I got the commas and periods in correct places. Me too. Thank you for being a conduit for all of us. No problem, my friend, and thank you for sending in your story, man. I had a friend that was a game warden here in Montana. He passed on many years ago. A few years after retiring. Isn't that the same story for a lot of people, right? You retire and then you bite it. It's not good. You got to keep that body moving all the time. I asked him once about Bigfoot. He said they just want to be left alone for the most part, but a few were just bad. There is more going on than we know, but would not elaborate on that. I find it amazing how little details of my experiences have been remembered because of others. I think, how did I forget that? Some of my experiences I have shared many times with many people over the years. Most thought I was crazy, but some knew differently. Yes, you can use my name. Dennis Barrow. Thanks for telling me how to pronounce it. Pronounced like bow and arrow. Barrow. Gotcha, man. I've had a wonderful, exciting life. Not done yet by any means. Just celebrated my 29th birthday for the 40th time towards the end of February. You do the math. Okay, man. Happy birthday. The following is a bit long, but I hope that it helps some people out there. It's a summary of my experiences with the hairy man so far in my life. Right on. Looking forward to this. First encounter. I was hiking with my dad up the Rattlesnake Creek drainage just north of the Missoula, Montana. Just north of Missoula, Montana, in the summer before I started my 3rd grade. So, must have been around 9 years old. 1961, I think. This area is now the Rattlesnake National Recreation Area and Wilderness. We had moved that summer to Missoula from Fromberg. Dad and I had spent a couple hours hiking up a trail, and returning, we crossed a small creek. Just after we were out of sight of the creek, there was a large crash of a tree falling. Dad said, "Let's go back and look." When we got to the creek, there were a couple of footprints in the mud that the water was just starting to seep into. Dad estimated later that the prints were about 18 inches long. They were very large, barefoot, human prints. Don't you like the way I say that? Human prints. I asked what they were from, and Dad just got really nervous and said it must have been a bear. Pushed me down the trail as fast as we could go. 2 years later, while in Boy Scouts, we had a camp out up the Rattlesnakes. There were about 10 scouts and 4 adults. I remember getting up in the middle of the night to go pee and seeing someone standing a couple dozen yards from camp in the trees. I figured one of the adults, but it was a huge person. I could not figure which adult it could be. I started to get a bit frightened, but a calm came over me right away. A thought came into my head that I should scrape away a bit of the forest duff, pee, cover back up. I've done this most of my life now. No shit. I went back to my tent and bed, slept very well for the rest of the trip, and felt extremely comfortable in the woods. I asked the adults who was up then, and none of them said they got up at all during the night. I showed them where I saw the huge person, and we could see where the grasses and the pine needles were smashed down. They had us move our camp. Looking back on it, it would not have made any difference. The next summer we camped again in the same basic area, but since it was such a nice night, we didn't put up our tents. We just fell asleep watching the stars. We were on a bit of a hill, so everyone had their own little level spots. During the night, a rainstorm moved in and dumped a lot of water. Myself and one other scout were literally swept down the mountain. What? I remember trying to get out of my sleeping bag, but I couldn't. The next thing I know is that I was picked up and placed a few feet from the stream, and it was onto a large log. When I could get out of my bag, the other scout was there with me. Someone helped us. It wasn't the scout leaders. I think it was in 1970. I wanted to see the Bigfoot film when it came into town. I'd borrowed the $3 from my mom to go, and she came along. I had to borrow the $3 from my mom to go, and she came along. It was an eye-opener for us. I slept all my summers out hiking and camping with or without the Boy Scouts. Did this throughout high school. I'm very comfortable in the woods and learned much while there. I can remember hearing wood knocks many times and an occasional scream that I always put off to mountain lions. Your video from a couple months ago that you heard the screams on made the hair on me rise. So Basic sounds I've heard many times. When I graduated high school, I was hired by Glacier National Park as a backcountry trail crew member. What a great few years, no doubt. No strange encounters in the wilds of Glacier. I wonder if Glacier is one of the places Teddy created for them. If so, why did I not encounter any? But just south of Glacier, around Hungry Horse Reservoir, I've had a couple of experiences. In the fall of '93, I was driving up a logging road to a place I wanted to hike into and hunt. It was mid-morning. As I rounded a corner with a view of a logged area on a hillside, about 300 to 400 yards in front of me, I see two deer hauling ass up the clear cut. I stopped to see what was up. Through my binos, there was at first I thought was a bear chasing them. Well, that bear went to two legs and ran like a person along a skid trail for 100 yards or so, really gaining fast on those deer. Then back on all fours going up the steep hillside. Deer went over the top, and the bear did too. Yeah, I know, it wasn't a bear. It was reddish in color, and I could see the long hair flowing as it ran. That same fall, I was camping along Hungry Horse Reservoir and remember being woken by the most ungodly screams, loud and like someone was being killed. There were a couple of other guys camped nearby, and we all got a fire going and stood there with our guns, wondering what the heck was going on. There were a few more screams, but it seemed they were getting farther away. The first scream was paralyzing. None of us were hunting that area, just camping there. The other guys headed home that day. I stayed for a couple more nights, but nothing else occurred. This incident happened in the late 80s, 1986, 87, or 88. I did send this to you about 1.5 years ago, but I don't think you ever saw or read it. I call it Oma and Her Montana Bigfoot. I could just keep reading this forever. Hope it doesn't stop. My mother is known Oma, German for grandma, to her grandchildren. I don't remember exact year. It happened in a campground along the Hungry Horse Reservoir, east side, midsummer in northwest Montana. A little background on Oma. She was born in Beach, North Dakota, and spent decades on a ranch in Montana where the road into the ranch was the Montana-North Dakota border. She was no stranger to wild animals, an avid hunter, and hated snakes of any kind. No doubt due to many encounters with rattlesnakes during her life on the ranch. The family moved to western Montana in the early 60s, and I remember her saying that she was very glad for the lack of rattlesnakes where we lived, even though the area we lived was called the Rattlesnake Mountains. But she still hated snakes in general. For instance, a water snake in the garden, her 12-gauge shotgun, and our destroyed garden in that order. And I think the snake got away. Oma loved the mountains, hunting and fishing and hiking. She started the first backpacking business in Montana, taking people into the Bob Marshall Wilderness for 1 to 2 weeks at a time. The business ran from the mid-60s to the mid-70s. She was the first licensed woman outfitter in the state of Montana. That is frickin' cool. Many encounters with black and grizzly bears over the years. I would have loved to sit down with her and talk. On to her encounter. She's camping in a campground, Murray Bay Campground, on the east side of the Hungry Horse Reservoir. This man-made reservoir is located a few miles south of Glacier National Park and has wilderness areas on the east and south sides. Fairly remote, but a few campgrounds along a very rough dirt logging road. She picked up a slide-in camper for her pickup and really enjoyed camping in that everything was together, set up and ready to go. Starting her coffee in the morning without getting out of bed, then going fishing for breakfast. Not a bad retirement. No shit. One morning in the campground, she was having her second cup of coffee when she heard a dog whine real funny, as she put it. It was at a camp spot across the road from hers, about 30 feet away. It was early morning and the sun had not come up over the mountains yet, but very light out. She said she was sitting at the table in her camper at the time and looked outside towards the other camper. That is when she had to look up at a very tall, hairy, dark figure walking down the campground road about 15 feet away. Several things she had remembered about it, as she was able to watch it for almost a minute total. The first thing was that it was aware of her and slowed and turned to look directly at her. No real neck. Excuse me. Somewhat pointed head and an almost ape-like face, dark and leathery. She said it was definitely a male. She said she knew what it was immediately. She had gone with me to see the Patterson-Gimlin film at 15 plus years prior and said it was a lot like that one. When I walked past her view, she got up and opened the door so she could see it some more. And that is when she noticed the arms were very long, almost to the knees. It turned to look at her again, but didn't stop walking. She said it rotated its upper body to look, not swiveling the head like we would. The shoulders were massive, over 4 feet wide. The eyes were dark and she did not feel threatened by him at all. She said she had the impression of a caveman for the face, big ridgeline above the eyes and a flat nose. The color was not as much black as a very, very dark red, and it was long hair, 4 to 6 inches long and clean. It stopped once more, looking at another camp, and then continued wailing out of sight. She was able to watch it for a good 200 yards as it slowly walked through the campground. What a blatant thing to do, isn't it? Knowing my mom, she probably lifted her coffee cup up to acknowledgement. She said as soon as it was out of sight, she had to beeline it to the outhouse. When she came back to the camper, she made a few notes of the encounter. That is when she realized how tall it was. The window she saw it from was over 6 feet off the ground at the top, and she had to look up at it. She then remembered that its head was taller than the camper across the road, 9.5 feet tall, so it was probably 10 feet plus tall. It had rained a little bit during the night, and she did see footprints on the road, not very clear, but really big, about 3 times the length of her hiking boots. She thought 18 to 20 inches long and 7 to 8 inches wide. The guy in the camp with the dog came out asking if she knew what happened to his dog, as it was still cowering under his trailer and would not come out. She told him what she saw, showed him the tracks, 4-foot stride for the most part, and he was packed and on the road in less than 10 minutes. Almost stayed there for another week of fishing, though she did not feel threatened by this big guy, but she did keep her .357 on her hip while she was fishing, no doubt. She always hoped to see another one, but it never happened as she passed away in 2005. Sorry to hear that. I would have loved to talk to that woman. I'm glad she took notes. My wife and I took our kids camping to the same campground many, many times over the years, and still camp there, as do our kids with their families. Always armed. Lots of dogs and an eye to the wood line always. I had surgery to remove some cancer a few years ago, and I had to conveyance for a few weeks. I had one of my kids pull my trailer up there and spent my time fishing. We've hunted that area a lot and seen some strange things like teepees in the woods made out of trees that several men could not move, and tree knocks and distant screams and yells. Maybe it is that big guy's kids and grandkids also, or it's the same one. Who knows how long they live, right? I have 5 children, 4 boys and a daughter. All the boys are avid hunters. I made a hunting camp for over 25 consecutive years down the Swan Valley, just over the mountains from Hungry Horse Reservoir. I took my sons to camp as soon as they were out of their diapers. Lots of encounters down there. There's an area that we never hunted near our camp because whenever any of us would go near it, we just went around it. I finally figured out that something was up. I knew the forest there like the back of my hand, but not that part. So around 2005, 2006, I decided to go into that part of the forest. The further I got into the woods, my feelings turned from, I should not be here, to get out, to fear. The fear was so much that I almost ran back out of that area. Now, after listening to the shares of people through you and your views, I know what it was. But that was a couple of decades ago, so didn't know any better. I told my sons about it back at camp, and one of them said he would go with me the next day. We split up and came at the forest from different directions. I didn't make it as far as the previous day before, but the fear was there. I just got out of there. When I got back to the truck, my son was already there waiting for me. He said he got scared and felt like he had to leave the area now. I could still see the fear in his eyes. I have over 40 years of hunting that area and still won't go into those woods. I think that was the only time in my life I have not listened to my sixth sense immediately. And that's usually when people don't get another chance to listen to it, right? Possibly. The sixth sense, it is there and I do listen to it. Saved me many a time from injury and other things. Was threatened with courts-martial in the army once for disobeying direct order because I felt what was injury or death was a result of the action the LT wanted me to carry out. He and a couple others did it without me and were killed in the accident that followed. I worked construction for many years and would stop workers from doing things because I could see what was going to happen. And it did, and they would have been hurt. Literally hundreds of times in my life, I've listened to that little voice in my head, and it had been for the better. These next 3 encounters happened in the same area over a 3-year period around 2009 to 2011. I've been known to hunt by finding a nice tree to sit against and watch the area through the back of my eyelids. Yeah, a nap. One hunting trip down the Swan, I had found a nice spot to sit during the day. I went there almost every day for a week and was walking along a trail heading there, just for that purpose. When I found my eyelids almost closing while I walked. Never had that happen before. Got the spot, got comfortable, and opened my pack and got my lunch out. Woke up an hour later with many items of my pack lined up on a log next to me, and all my lunch and snacks gone. There was a light dusting of snow, and the snow was messed up around me, but no actual tracks. If it had been a person there, would have been some tracks somewhere. Nothing. Kind of crazy, huh? Excuse me, that'd be a little alarming, for sure. It's a little bit of a David Pilatus email. Another time in the same area, I was walking along a game trail and realized my rear scope cover was coming loose. In fact, it fell off a couple times, but I was able to find it. A couple hours later, I realized it was gone, and I knew there was no way I was going to find it then, as I had wandered around a bit, and no way I was going to go backtrack my exact path. There were no other hunters in the area midweek, and back then hunters would avoid areas others were hunting. I got back to my truck later in the day, and there on the hood was my scope cover. We've heard that similar shit happen to a bunch of other guys too. That's crazy. I said thanks to whomever brought this back, and had a warm feeling of "you're welcome" come over me. I don't know how else to explain it. I guess it was mind speak. That's pretty cool. In this area, there are several large meadows. One is about 15 acres in size, and old growth timber along one end of it. Back before the Forest Service closed the road that went to it, I had driven there and camped a couple of times. There was an old trapper's cabin there that was almost gone back in the 80s, so I'm sure it isn't any more now. But let's just say I know that area pretty good. I like to hunt from that hillside at about 400 yards away, 150 feet in elevation from the far side of the meadow. I'd come in from the back of the hill and made a lean-to out of branches and a good stump to sit on, out of sight, good cover. Lean-to was there for many years, may still be, but haven't been there for a decade now. One day, hiked to my lean-to and, as always, was slow, quiet, and trying not to be seen. I was glassing the meadow and surrounding woods. When I got to the area, I camped. When I camped in, and holy crap, it's a Bigfoot. That's what I said in my mind. It was standing next to a big stump by the camp area. When I said this in my mind, it turned and looked directly at me, then walked back into the woods out of sight. He was reddish in color and big. I remember that stump because loggers from a century ago had cut notches for springboards at the base of the trees so they could cut up higher with the saws. I walked down there to check it out. Figured there's probably not any deer or elk in the area after the guy being there. That tree stump was at least 14 feet tall, and the hairy man was within 3 feet of the top of it. I could see depressions in the forest duff from where he had walked. I'll not be scared of the forest. but I do spend a bit more time with my head on a swivel mode now. When I go into the woods now, even here on my 10 acres, I just purchased in 2019 and built a home, I say a mental hello, and I'm not here to harm anyone each day. Plenty of animals here though, elk and deer, coyotes, foxes. They like my chickens, but not the electric fence I put up. Wolves, mountain lions, etc. I built my home with a walk-out basement and finished it to an apartment. Glad I did, as my daughter and 2 grandkids are now living with us. My granddaughter, now 6, said last fall that she had seen a big hairy man walking across the field below our home. She does not watch any shows that would have influenced her. We've had the talk about hairy men of the forest, and we have dogs, and the kids to not go outside alone ever. Perfect call. Perfect call. Just watch you share the Owlman's introduction of his family to them. I plan on doing that this spring when it warms up, still below 0 here at night. Thanks again for helping us all with your platform. I've subscribed to you on Rumble and set notifications to let me know when you post there. Yes, I'd also like to know why we are being lied to. If you're ever in the Helena, Montana area, you have a place to rest your head and fill your belly. At Libations. Dennis Barrow. Dennis, I absolutely appreciate you. That was a lot of your time of life spent to share with all of us here today. And I really appreciate that a lot. It was a good long one, almost wore me out. We got it done. There was a lot of experiences there. A lot. Thank God if there's the rule is the kids can't go out without the canines. Because I know there's a lot of people out there who have no ill feelings towards these beings. I don't, but there is a lot of unexplainable shit going on out there without a doubt. And if you have any doubt at all about that, for anyone out there, just go jump on over to David Plattis' channel, Can-Am Missing 401, and listen to a few of those. All right, and you'll understand why children should never be alone when you're rural. Probably, well, anywhere these days, but if there's forests, big trees, rural mountains, they better have dogs with them. But anyway, let me get a little more organized, and I might just sit here a little while longer and get some more shares ready for tomorrow. I'll be back shortly.